What's up guys, my name is Kasey, and if you saw my last video, then you know that I've been wanting to do more videos about giving tips and tricks about getting into UCs and universities, colleges in California, all that in general. So this video is going to be about the personal insight question process to your UC application and how you can get into UCs with your personal insight questions being great. These tips and tricks of mine for the personal insight questions are what allowed me to get into my dream schools such as UC Davis and UCLA. So I feel like I have something to add here. If you don't take away anything from this video, I do apologize. I am, just giving what I feel is good information. So now I first want to start off by saying that this video caters towards transfer students once again, because that is the demographic that I fit under. However, this is still just as helpful for entering freshmen into college coming out of their senior year of high school. So let's get right into it. Number one, the first thing that I want to say is that this is not life or death. And what I mean by that is your personal insight questions are not the end of the world if you feel like you're not a great writer. Again, when you're a transfer student, your odds of getting in are a lot higher than entering freshman, because you've already proven that you can take on college curriculum classes and the vigor of all of that. And as a result, your personal insight questions still give the UC admissions offices an idea of who you are, other than your transcripts and GPA, but they already know you can handle college. So it's not that crucial that you make sure that the personal insight questions give a complete description of who you are. Another little tidbit that I want to add is that a University of California's rep for the admissions, I'm not exactly sure on his title, if I can find the video I'll link it, basically says that a lot of the times as transfer students, the admissions offices for these different universities, if it's say UC, Riverside, Irvine, or Davis, a lot of the times they'll get your application and they may skim through your personal insight questions, make sure you have the requirements, and then just pass it along. There's a lot of little things to take away when you're a transfer student with your personal insight questions. They're not as important. They're still very important, but not as important. So as for the timeline of your personal insight questions and when you should start them and work on them and how long you should be working on them prior to your application. So applications are due for University of California if you're applying in the fall in November. With that said, I started 6 months in advance. I wanted to get a head start in the summer. I didn't want to have to worry about taking my college classes in the fall while juggling my personal insight questions applications too much on top of applying for my tag, because you have to manually input your transcript basically for that. So I wanted to make sure that I got the personal insight questions out of the way while I had as much free time as possible during the summer. So I started in June, and the applications were due in November. So I started 6 months in advance. I would recommend that for anybody. However, you don't have to do 6 months in advance. You can do 4 months in advance, but I would say try to start them at some point in the summer prior to going into your fall semester at your community college, or into your or if it's high school, same thing applies. If you're taking summer classes at your community college too, or if you're taking any type of summer classes in high school, I would also try to pinpoint exactly when that ends or when it starts, so you can work on these personal insight questions before or after, still before the school year starts officially for the fall, because that's going to give you the most amount of time to work on these. As a transfer student, I didn't have any tutors, and I actually didn't really have anybody read over my personal insight questions when I completed them. I highly recommend that you guys have people peer edit and peer review your personal insight questions, whether it's family or friends or colleagues. But as for hiring private tutors to work on them and everything, again, maybe coming out of high school, that is something that is recommended. Just as a transfer student, I don't think you need it that crucially, unless you're going into higher level universities that you're applying for other than the UC system, but that's just my personal opinion. But also, I would say I'm an adequate writer, so the personal insight questions weren't that hard for me to conceptualize, is that a word? So if you need a lot more help with writing, maybe that's the path you want to take. So when it comes to the personal insight questions and how to write them, we got to look at the questions itself. Now, for transfer students, you're actually going to get a default question 0 that you have to answer. For entering freshmen, you have to pick 4 of the questions, and all of the questions are the same except the question 0 that the transfer students get. And I'm just going to read back that question. Everyone's going to have to answer this if you're transferring from a community college to a University of California. And the question reads, please describe how you have prepared for your intended major, including your readiness to succeed in your upper division courses once you enroll at the university. Now, that question basically is the easiest one that you're going to have, and it's a giveaway for transfer students. If you're an entering freshman, you're not going to have this easy question. Again, it doesn't mean that the other questions won't come off as easy to you. I'm just saying this one is extremely easy in that it basically tells you what to write about. You know, you don't have to think of a story or a time in your life that you have to expand upon. This is really just asking about your academic venture in college. And you can go on the University of California website, look up these questions, and that's what I did religiously just to get an idea of where I wanted to, which questions I wanted to answer. And they also give you a things to consider section. So for this question 0, the things to consider that it has are, how did your interest in your major develop? Do you have any experience related to your outside major in the classroom, such as volunteer work, internships and employment, or participation in student organizations and activities? And it also has a little bit more after that, just to give you an idea of where you can go with your headspace in answering this question. Again, with this question, I would let your passion for your major speak for itself. And if you don't have one, I would just do your best to make it sound like you have one, because when it comes to the personal insight questions, I would be lying if I told you that nobody exaggerates something to a degree. So if you really don't have a passion for some type of subject matter that you're majoring in for college, then just do your best to make it sound like it. And I know that's not the best advice, but I know for a lot of people, they already do have a passion or a huge attachment to some type of subject matter, which is why they're choosing to major in it in the first place. So for me, having a passion for history since elementary school, this was a very easy question to answer, so much so that I had to cut down a lot of my own personal tail with my interest in the major developing and really dig into my readiness for the upper division courses, which again, that I would just, you know, if you have, say you're majoring in psychology and the psychology classes that you took at community college, you are averaging mostly A's or B's, then I would definitely state that. With the lower division psychology classes, I have proven that I am proficient or advanced in these classes with the passing of an A or B. Therefore, I am ready for the upper division classes. I'm already used to the college level curriculum at my community college, and I'm ready to jump at the forefront to getting into these university level classes and completing my major. That's where I would go with that question. It's the easiest one. It tells you exactly what you need to write. Now I'm going to read back the other 7 questions that you have to pick from. Out of those 7, you have to pick 3 more for your application as a transfer student. As an entering freshman, you already have to pick 4. So they give you an extra question. So you have 8 to select from, because you don't have that required question that I call a question 0 like transfer students do. But I'm just going to read back the 7 other questions that transfer students have. That extra question for the freshmen, you can look that up yourself on the University of California admissions website. So reading these back, number 1, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. Personally, that was the next question that I answered after question 0. Question 2, every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. And question number 2 was again the next question that I answered. Question 3, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? Question 4, describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. Question 5, describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? Question 5 was the final question that I answered. So 1, 2, and 5 is what I answered, but I'm going to continue to question 6 and 7 and read them back. Question 6, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? And question 7, beyond what you have already shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admission to the University of California. So out of those 7 questions, you've already had to answer the question 0. So you just got to pick 3 out of the 7. And when you go over these, there's a mixture of academics and personal life. Really, it's up to you to decide where your strong suit is in writing, which bubble you're going to have more to expand upon and articulate upon. So for me personally, question 1 is more of a personal question. Question 2 definitely is a personal question. And question 5 is definitely a personal question. And that's not to say that I don't have anything to say about academics, but you can sound a lot more interesting and talk a lot more about yourself in a lot of different mini subsections than just academics, which is one category. Because question 1 is asking about leadership, something personally that I can talk about. You can also get into academics with that, but it's more of a personal question. Question 2 is your creative side, and that for me, I think was my golden question, in that I was able to talk about myself solely and passions outside of the classroom. Question 5 is about an obstacle you have to overcome. That can be both academic and personal, I guess. For me, I took it more personal. But really just ask yourself where you feel comfortable talking about yourself. Is it more of your academic side or more of your personal side? And these, I guess, these questions can fit into both areas, but it's mainly up to you to decide where you want to fit into this. Now, when I wrote these, I had my own type of theory called a bubble theory, which is basically you want to have one theme that's its own, like it's like the core of your personal insight questions, like its soul bubble here. And then each question is a miniature bubble that connects to your overarching theme that trickles into each one. You don't have to make the overarching theme all about these questions for each one, but you want to make sure that it ties everything together so everything feels cohesive and well-rounded. So my overarching theme here was dual culturalism, because I come from a different country and hence half of my family is very different than the other half. This dual culturalism allowed me to expand upon myself, talk about something that's a little unique to my own experiences in life, and go with that. If you're struggling to find something that makes yourself sound unique or interesting, I promise you there is something. You just have to look at yourself more. It doesn't need to be something from 10 years ago. It can be something that happened in the last 6 months to a year. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be writing about the coronavirus and COVID-19 and how that affected them, and that's something I would definitely use. I just want to put a disclaimer that a lot of people are probably going to be writing about that. So if you are choosing to do that, try to take a very, very outside the box approach to it in terms of what you're going to say about it. When it comes to specifics, like for question 0 for the how I prepared for my intended major and the upper division courses, really easy. Talked about history, passion for it, and then how I got straight A's in all my history classes at my community college. For question 1, when it came to leadership, and I'm an introvert, so the leadership question can actually apply to anybody. You really just have to think about where you've been a leader in different parts of your life. So for myself, because of my dual culturalism, I've always had family members that there was always a speaking barrier between family member to family member, especially amongst my siblings and my Spanish-speaking family members. So I was always, because being the oldest, I was always that leadership figure to make sure that I can communicate between both sides of the family as much as possible. So I was a leader in communication amongst my household at a young age, going into when I was older, going into my job into fast food, going from a lower level associate to a higher level associate showed me how you can transition from being the learner to the teacher in a practical work setting. When it came to question 2, that one was my favorite to answer. I just had to talk about myself, and I talked about how I had a passion for writing stories, which intertwines with history and my dual culturalism, and my passion for photography, which in my opinion, when you take a picture, there's so many sides to how you can take a picture in different angles. It kind of reflects, the different sides to culture, and how culture is not just, 2 sides. It's like multidimensional. And then question 5, which talks about a barrier I had to overcome, mainly had to do with coming from a different country and the obstacles that come about with that. That one's a little bit long-winded, so I'm not going to touch too much on that. But again, those are the things that I chose to talk about, more about personal things than academic things. So as for the outline for how to basically write these, try out each question, see each, go over each question and talk about different things that you could talk about for each one, and then do process of elimination for the ones that you think you have the least amount to say or could be the least interesting or least helpful to your application. Next, when it comes to writing the questions out, I wouldn't pay attention too much to the word count. I think you're limited to 350 characters. When you write these, keep in mind that you don't want to go too long with them. And I wouldn't really worry about being too short, because you're probably going to have plenty to want to articulate and say. So when you write these out, write them with the idea that they can't be too long, but don't pay too much in mind to the 350 word count. Once you finish your question, look at the word count, then go over what you can cut and really consider the extra adjectives that you're using, an extra noun, maybe an entire sentence that you've already gotten your point across, but you're adding that sentence to really just add some little razzle dazzle to it that you don't need. You want to cut things out like that and get it down to 350 characters. And the last thing that I didn't do myself, but you definitely should, don't make my mistake. Even though I was still able to get into most of my choice schools, still, you want to have people read over your personal insight questions. These are crucial for you, and you want to make sure that people read these over so they can give you an outside perspective on them. And I would say that people who are reading your essay that didn't write, if you're not the one writing it, you usually can point out the grammatical errors and typos a lot better than the person who wrote it itself. I would say do all of this within the first month that you plan on starting your personal insight questions. And then from there, because you've done it in the first month, every week or every other week leading up until November, just check in on the questions, read them back, go over them, see how you feel about them. And naturally, because you've given yourself so much time, you should be able to decide whether or not you need to revise or completely re-edit these questions. That is my personal tips and tricks for the personal insight questions. I don't think that you should think of this as the end of the world. If you're not a great writer, then I can understand maybe going for a personal tutor route or some type of tutor program. Again, these tips and tricks are what allowed me to get into UC Davis and UCLA. Thank you guys again for watching. I hope you found something here that was informative. I'm going to try to find that video I was talking about earlier from the University of California's rep from the admissions office and link it down below. All right, I'll catch you guys next time.